Medicine got very good at interrupting death, but not very good at slowing functional decline. We've added years to life, but not enough life to those years. We extended the end of life. We didn't protect the middle. Most chronic diseases don't appear suddenly. They develop silently over 20 to 40 years. If we wait until disease appears, we've already missed the opportunity to preserve quality of life. So if I had to choose one lever that impacts almost every other system in the body, it would be
Welcome back to the Young Lab, the show where internal health, performative, and regenerative aesthetics come together under one evidence-backed framework. In episode 1, we explored why inside-out human optimization matters. And in episode 2, we looked at what's possible when biology is treated correctly. So today, we're zooming out. Dr. Young, this episode is about the big picture, the framework you actually use when you think about longevity. So let's dive in. Hi, Dr. Young. I'm excited to have this conversation with you today. How are you? How's
Hi,
everything?
Layla. I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Good, good. How's your new year been so far?
Oh, it's been awesome. I mean, it's a great start of the year. I mean, people are really excited about making changes, and we're here to help.
Absolutely. All right, awesome. So let's dive in. I have a few really good questions that I'm excited to ask you. Let's start with this one. So we hear the word longevity everywhere, right? But you're very intentional about using the word health span. So can you explain the difference and why health span is the goal and not just living longer?
Of course, and this is a great place to start because if people don't understand the gap or the difference, nothing else that we talk about makes sense. So, lifespan is simple, it's how long you live. Health span is a little different. Health span is how long you live without chronic disease, disability, or loss of independence. In other words, how many years you're actually well. And over the last several decades, those two numbers have been moving in very different directions. Let's talk about lifespan first. So in the United States today, the average lifespan is roughly 73 years for men, about 79 years for women. And if we go back 100 years, those numbers were dramatically lower, largely because of infections, childbirth complications, and trauma. So medicine did something incredible. From the early 1900s through the mid to late 20th century, lifespan increased by more than 30 years. And that was one of the greatest achievements in human history. But here's the part that most people don't realize. Health span did not increase at the same rate. So today in the United States, the average health span is estimated at 63 years for men and 65 years for women. So that means men live about 10 years with chronic disease or disability. Women live about 14 years with chronic disease or disability. And that gap, the years lived in poor health, have actually widened over the last 20 to 30 years. If we look back to the 1970s and the 1980s, people didn't live as long, but many spent a smaller portion of their life disabled. Today, people are surviving longer with diabetes, with heart disease, with arthritis, obesity, cognitive decline, and frailty. We're better at keeping people alive. We're not better at keeping people well. This gap is even more pronounced for women. Women live longer than men, but they spend more years in poor health. Why is that? Because women are more likely to have autoimmune diseases, osteoporosis, chronic pain, neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's. So longevity without resilience creates a longer period of decline. Now, here's where the physiology matters. The body doesn't suddenly become unhealthy at age 63 or 65. Chronic disease develops slowly over decades. Insulin resistance begins in the 30s or 40s, muscle mass decline quietly starting in midlife, cardiorespiratory fitness drops unless it's trained, mitochondrial efficiency declines year after year, inflammation rises gradually. By the time disease is diagnosed, biology has already shifted for a long time. So when we say lifespan increased but health span didn't, what we're really saying is this. Medicine got very good at interrupting death, but not very good at slowing functional decline. We extended the end of life. We didn't protect the middle. Over the last 20 to 30 years specifically, we've seen rising rates of obesity and insulin resistance, earlier onset of type 2 diabetes, more years lived with multiple chronic conditions, declining physical fitness across the population. At the same time, medical interventions have kept people alive longer despite that decline. So the problem isn't that people are aging, the problem is how they're aging. We've added years to life, but not enough life to those years. And this is exactly why we focus on Healthspan, because the goal isn't just to live longer. The goal is to stay strong, to stay independent, stay cognitively sharp, stay engaged for as long as possible. Over the last several decades, lifespan has increased significantly for both men and women, but healthspan has lagged behind. The result is a growing gap between how long we live and how long we live well. And closing that gap is what modern longevity and health span focused medicine is really about. If lifespan is how long the engine runs, health span is how well it runs while it's on. And that's the part that we can still change.
Absolutely. I really like what you said about, living longer, but not particularly living well and adding life to years, but not adding the years to life. So, with that being said, why do you think that our healthcare system has gotten so good at extending lifespan, but so poor at really preserving the quality of life?
This is one of the most important questions in medicine because the answer explains why the gap between lifespan and health span exists. To understand it, we need to take a look at the phases of medicine, what some people call like medicine 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. Each phase reflects what medicine was designed to solve at that point in history. Medicine 1.0 was about survival. This was medicine before antibiotics, before modern surgery and advanced imaging. People die from infections, people die from trauma, from childbirth. So medicine focused on treating infections, controlling bleeding, managing acute injuries, preventing immediate death. Once we introduced sanitation, vaccines, antibiotics, emergency care, life expectancy increased dramatically. That was a massive success. But medicine was never designed to address chronic diseases or aging because most people simply don't live long enough for those problems to dominate. As people began living longer, chronic disease became the main threat. This is where Medicine 2.0 emerged. Medicine 2.0 is the system most of us experience today. It's focused on diagnosing and managing disease once it becomes clinically obvious. In Medicine 2.0, we ask, do you have diabetes? Do you have heart disease? Do you have cancer? If the answer is yes, we intervene. Physiologically, Medicine 2.0 focuses on late stage markers, blood sugar after diabetes develops, blood pressure after vascular damage, cholesterol after plaque has formed. Medicine 2.0 saves lives, but it's reactive by design. It treats disease after function has already declined. So here's the problem. Most chronic diseases don't appear suddenly. They develop silently over 20 to 40 years. Long before diabetes, there's insulin resistance. Long before heart disease, there's inflammation and vascular dysfunction. Long before frailty, there is muscle loss and declining fitness. But these early changes are rarely measured in traditional medicine. This is where Medicine 3.0 comes in. And this 3.0 is a framework that was popularized by Dr. Peter Attia. He's a longevity expert and physician in Austin, Texas. Medicine 3.0 asks a different question. Instead of asking, do you have disease? It asks, how well is your body functioning right now? And where is it beginning to decline? Medicine 3.0 focuses on function, capacity, trajectory, not just diagnoses. It measures insulin sensitivity before diabetes, muscle mass and strength before frailty, cardiorespiratory fitness before heart disease, mitochondrial energy production before fatigue and decline, because these systems determine how fast we age long before disease appears. Medicine 3.0 exists because healthspan is lost before lifespan ends. If we wait until disease appears, we've already missed the opportunity to preserve quality of life. Medicine 3.0 intervenes earlier when systems are still adaptable. It shifts medicine from reacting to disease to protecting function, from managing decline to changing trajectory. Our healthcare system is excellent at extending lifespan because it evolved through medicine 1.0 and medicine 2.0 to treat survival and disease. But preserving quality of life requires medicine 3.0, a system designed to measure and protect the physiology that determines how we age. Medicine 1.0 helped us survive. Medicine 2.0 helped us live longer with disease. Medicine 3.0 helps us live better for longer. And that's why it's the future of medicine.
Absolutely. And when you do have patients and you evaluate a patient, whether they're 35 or 65, what is the actual equation you're running in your head? So, what really determines how long someone stays well?
That's a great question. Because this is where most people get confused and where medicine usually stops explaining. When I evaluate someone, I'm not asking, what disease do you have? I'm asking, how well does your body function today? And where is it headed over time? That's what the health span equation is designed to answer. When we talk about health span, we're talking about how long someone remains capable physically, mentally, and emotionally, not just alive, but strong, independent, energetic, engaged. The health span equation is simply a way of organizing the biology that determines that outcome. At its core, the health span equation asks one question: does your body have enough capacity to produce energy, repair damage, and adapt to stress faster than it accumulates damage? If the answer is yes, health span is preserved. If the answer is no, decline accelerates. So let's break that down. On one side of the equation is capacity. That's everything that allows your body to function well. Capacity includes metabolic health, which is how well you manage glucose and insulin. Number two, muscle mass and strength, your reserve against frailty and insulin resistance. Number three, cardiorespiratory fitness, how well you deliver and use oxygen. Number four, mitochondrial function, how efficiently cells produce energy. Hormonal balance is next, whether the body is in a building or breakdown state. Number six is sleep and recovery. This is where the body repairs itself. And then last, number seven is stress regulation, whether the nervous system allows repairs or blocks it. So these systems don't work in isolation. They multiply each other. On the other side of the equation are accelerators of aging. These are forces that subtract from health span. So they include insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, poor sleep, or chronic psychological stress, loss of purpose or meaning. So these don't cause immediate diseases. They quietly erode capacity over decades. So the health span equation looks like this: health span equals functional capacity minus chronic damage and stress. When capacity stays high and damage stays low, people age slowly. When capacity declines and damage accumulates, aging speeds up. Now, here is the most important part, and this isn't theoretical. We can measure this. That's where the health span score comes in. The health span score is how we turn this equation into something practical and actionable. Instead of saying you're healthy or you're not, we measure how each system is performing. For example, we measure body composition and muscle quality, metabolic markers like insulin sensitivity. We also measure cardiorespiratory fitness and oxygen utilization, strength and functional performance, sleep quality and recovery patterns, stress physiology and nervous system balance. So each of these contribute to an overall score. What the score tells us is not just where you are, but why. It answers what systems are limiting your health span right now. Where are you most vulnerable? Where will intervention have the highest return? This is why two people the same age can look completely different biologically. One may have strong muscle and good fitness and metabolic flexibility. The other may have low reserve, high inflammation, and poor recovery. Same age, very different health span scores, very different futures. The real power of the health span score is that it's trackable. We can measure it, intervene strategically, and reassess over time. Instead of reacting to disease, we manage trajectory. So, to answer your question directly, how long someone stays well is determined by how much functional capacity they have and how early we identify and correct declines in the system that support energy, repair, and resilience. Health span isn't random, it's not luck, it's measurable, it's modifiable. And once you understand the equation, it becomes trainable.
Absolutely. And let's talk about the 12 hallmarks of aging for a second. So,
Mhm.
when people hear that, sometimes their eyes will glaze over. So, how do you translate those concepts into something practical for real people?
That's a fair question because the terms sound intimidating, but the idea behind them is actually very simple. So, the 12 hallmarks of aging are a scientific framework that describes the main biological processes that drive aging. They're not diseases, they're mechanisms underneath disease. And you don't need to memorize them, but you should know what they represent. Let me start by naming them so people know what we're talking about. The 12 hallmarks include genomic instability, telomere shortening, epigenetic changes, loss of protein quality control, mitochondrial dysfunction, cellular senescence, stem cell exhaustion, chronic inflammation, dysregulated nutrient sensing, altered intracellular communication, impaired autophagy, and changes in the microbiome. And that sounds like a lot, I know. And that's where people get tuned out, and I don't blame them. So here's how I simplify it. So all 12 hallmarks fall into three big buckets. Once you understand the buckets, the list makes sense. The first bucket is damage accumulating inside of cells. This includes things like DNA damage, telomere shortening, epigenetic changes. Over time, cells lose the ability to copy and repair themselves accurately. This makes tissues less resilient and more error prone. The second bucket is a loss of repair and recycling. This includes mitochondrial dysfunction, impaired autophagy, loss of protein quality control, and stem cell exhaustion. As these systems decline, the body becomes less efficient at cleaning out damage and regenerating tissue. This is why recovery slows and fatigue increases with age. The third bucket is a breakdown in communication between cells and systems. This includes chronic inflammation, cellular senescence, dysregulated nutrient sensing, altered intercellular communication, and microbiome changes. Cells start sending the wrong messages, often inflammatory ones, and everything just slows down. This is why aging feels systemic, not isolated. Here's the most important part for listeners: these hallmarks do not suddenly appear at old age. They begin quietly, often in the 30s and 40s, long before disease is diagnosed. By the time someone has diabetes, heart disease, or cognitive decline, these processes have been active for decades. And this is where the health span equation connects directly to the hallmarks. You don't treat the hallmarks one by one, you influence them by improving the systems that control them. For example, building muscle improves insulin signaling and reduces inflammation. Cardiorespiratory fitness improves mitochondrial function. Sleep activates autophagy and cellular repair. So, stress regulation reduces inflammatory signaling. Metabolic health slows damage accumulation. One intervention can influence multiple hallmarks at the same time. That's leverage. So instead of asking people to remember 12 scientific terms, I focus on three questions. Is your body accumulating damage faster than it can repair? Are your energy and repair systems functioning well? Are your cells and tissues communicating clearly and calmly? So, if we can improve these three things, we can influence all 12 hallmarks downstream. The 12 hallmarks of aging matter because they explain why health span declines, but they become practical only when we translate them into systems people can actually improve through movement, nutrition, sleep, stress regulation, and metabolic health. You don't need to memorize the hallmarks. If you support the biology of repair, energy production, and communication, you're already influencing the aging process.
And if you did have to choose one lever that impacts almost everything else in the health span equation, what would it be and why does metabolic health sit so close to the center?
So, if I had to choose one lever that impacts almost every other system in the body, it would be metabolic health. And it's not even close. The reason is simple. Metabolic health determines how your body produces, uses, stores, and distributes energy. Every system that determines health span depends on energy. Your muscles, your brain, your hormones, your immune system, your mitochondria. So if energy handling is impaired, everything downstream suffers. So when people hear metabolic health, they often think about weight or calories, but weight is a very late and blunt signal. Metabolic health is really about how sensitive your cells are to insulin, how stable your blood sugar is throughout the day, how efficiently you can switch between burning sugar and burning fat, how much inflammation your metabolism creates. At the center of all of this is insulin sensitivity. So, insulin is not a bad hormone. It's essential. Its job is to move energy, mainly glucose, from the bloodstream into cells so it can be used to produce energy or stored for later. When insulin sensitivity is good, muscle cells easily take up glucose. Blood sugar stays stable, energy production is efficient, inflammation remains low. This is what a healthy, flexible metabolism looks like. So, over time, often due to inactivity, excess calories, poor sleep, and chronic stress, cells become less responsive to insulin. This is called insulin resistance. When this happens, the pancreas compensates by releasing more insulin. So now you have higher insulin levels, you have higher circulating glucose, and then more energy is being stored instead of used. This process often begins years or decades before diabetes is ever diagnosed. So chronically elevated insulin and glucose don't just affect blood sugar. They change how the entire body functions. They promote visceral fat storage around organs. They suppress fat burning. They increase chronic low grade inflammation. They impair mitochondrial efficiency. They accelerate muscle breakdown and disrupt hormone signaling. So the body shifts from an adaptable, resilient state into a rigid, inflammatory state. So, from a biologic standpoint, insulin resistance accelerates aging at the cellular level. It increases oxidative stress, meaning more cellular damage. It impairs autophagy. Remember, that's the process where cells clean up and recycle damaged parts. It worsens endothelial function, which affects blood vessels and your circulation. It interferes with normal hormone signaling. The result is faster damage accumulation and slower repair, and that is aging. This is why metabolic health sits at the center of the health span equation. If metabolic health is impaired, muscles become harder to build and easier to lose. Exercise adaptations are blunted, sleep quality worsens, inflammation increases, brain energy declines, and mitochondria become less efficient. So you can be exercising, eating clean, taking supplements, but if insulin resistance is present, progress is limited. Most people think metabolic disease starts with diabetes, and it doesn't. Insulin resistance often begins 10 to 20 years earlier. So, someone can have a normal fasting glucose, they can have a normal A1C or hemoglobin A1C, and this is how we monitor blood sugar levels over a 3 month period. And they can have these normal values, but they could still be metabolically unhealthy. This is why people often feel tired, inflamed, or stuck, even when their labs are reported as normal. So, there is some good news. Metabolic health is one of the most modifiable drivers of aging we have. Muscle acts like a glucose sink and improves insulin sensitivity. Movement improves glucose disposal immediately. Sleep restores hormonal regulation. Stress reduction reduces insulin signaling. You don't fix metabolic health with one pill. You fix it by restoring normal physiology. And this is where Medicine 3.0 changes the conversation. Instead of waiting for diabetes, we measure insulin levels, glucose patterns over time, body composition, metabolic flexibility, and we intervene early. while cells are still responsive and change is still possible. Metabolic health sits at the center of the Healthspan equation because it governs energy flow. And energy availability determines how every other system in the body functions, adapts, and repairs. When metabolic health declines, aging accelerates everywhere. Metabolic health isn't just about blood sugar, it's about whether your body is building and repairing or breaking down. And that's why it may be the most powerful lever for longevity that we have.
And you spoke about how muscle is so important. And
Mhm.
I know that you often say that muscle is the organ of longevity. So, how do muscle mass, cardiorespiratory fitness, and mitochondrial health interact to really protect health span as we do age?
I love this question because it connects three systems people often think about separately, but in reality, they function as one integrated unit. When I say muscle is the organ of longevity, I'm not talking about strength or aesthetics. I'm talking about physiology. Muscle is one of the most powerful regulators of metabolism, energy, and resilience in the human body. Skeletal muscle is metabolically active. It's the largest site of glucose disposal or storage in the body. When muscle is healthy, it pulls glucose out of the bloodstream efficiently. It improves insulin sensitivity, it reduces inflammation, it stabilizes energy availability. As we age and lose muscle, a process called sarcopenia, metabolic health declines, insulin resistance worsens, and vulnerability increases. That's why muscle loss is so tightly linked to frailty, falls, loss of independence, and early mortality. Muscles also function as an endocrine organ. When muscles contract, they release signaling molecules called myokines. Myokines improve insulin sensitivity, they reduce systemic inflammation, they support brain health, they promote mitochondrial biogenesis. So, muscle doesn't just move you, it communicates with your brain, it communicates with your liver, it communicates with your immune system and fat tissue. Next is cardiorespiratory fitness. This is often measured as VO2 max. This reflects how efficiently your heart, your lungs, your blood vessels, and muscles work together to deliver and use oxygen. So, oxygen is required for efficient energy production inside mitochondria, or the powerhouses of our cells. So, higher cardiorespiratory fitness means better energy delivery, greater mitochondrial efficiency, higher energy reserves. This is why VO2 max is one of the strongest predictors of survival that we have, independent of your weight or cholesterol. So, higher cardiorespiratory fitness means you have a physiologic reserve. That means that you will tolerate stress better, that you'll recover from illness or injury. Aging takes less from you. This is why two people with the same age can have completely different functional capacity. One has reserve, the other is operating near the edge. So, mitochondria are where energy is actually produced. They convert oxygen and fuel into ATP, which is our true energy currency. Healthy muscle has more mitochondria, better functioning mitochondria, greater ability to produce energy with less damage. As mitochondrial function declines, fatigue increases, recovery slows, inflammation rises, and aging accelerates. The key concept here is that muscle fitness and mitochondria form a positive feedback loop. More muscle improves insulin sensitivity and fuel delivery. Better fitness improves oxygen delivery to muscles. Healthier mitochondria improve energy production inside muscle. Each system strengthens the other. So when muscle mass declines, glucose disposal worsens, insulin resistance increases, mitochondrial density decreases. So when fitness declines, oxygen delivery becomes inefficient, energy production drops, fatigue increases. So when mitochondria decline, muscles weaken, recovery slows, and inflammation rises. This is how aging accelerates. These changes don't begin at age 70. They often start in the 30s and 40s and quietly. Loss of muscle and fitness happens gradually until suddenly it's not reversible. That's why early intervention matters. The strongest protection for health span is maintaining muscle and fitness over time, not perfection. It's about consistency. Strength training preserves muscle and bone. Aerobic and hybrid training preserve cardiorespiratory fitness. Movement signals mitochondria to stay efficient and resilient. So, muscle, cardiorespiratory fitness, and mitochondrial health protect health span because together they determine how well the body produces energy, regulates metabolism, tolerates stress, and recovers from damage as you age. When these systems are strong, aging slows. When these decline, everything else follows. Muscle is the organ of longevity because it sits at the intersection of energy, metabolism, and resilience. Protect these systems and you protect your health span.
And in the health span equation, where do things like peptides, hormones, and advanced therapies really fit in? And beyond that, where do people tend to either misuse or maybe over prioritize them?
This is an important question because this is where a lot of people misunderstand how the body actually works.
Mhm.
Peptides, hormones, and advanced therapies can be incredibly helpful, but they are not the foundation of health span. They are adjuncts. That means that they're tools that modify physiology, not tools that replace it. To understand where they fit, you first have to understand how the body adapts at all. The human body adapts to signals. These signals come primarily from movement, muscle contraction, metabolic stress, recovery, and safety. Exercise sends a signal, sleep sends a signal, nutrition sends a signal, stress or the absence of stress sends a signal. So, advanced therapies do not create these signals. They change how strongly your body responds to them, and that distinction matters. In the healthspan equation, peptides, hormones, and advanced therapies sit on the top of the foundation, not underneath it. The foundation is metabolic health, muscle, cardiorespiratory fitness, sleep, recovery, and nervous system regulation. Advanced tools amplify these systems, but they don't compensate for their absence. Hormones are a great example. Hormones don't create health. They set the internal environment that determines whether the body can adapt. So take testosterone. It can increase the capacity for muscle protein synthesis, but it doesn't build muscle without training. Estrogen supports bone, connective tissue, metabolic health, and brain function, but it doesn't replace movement or nutrition. Thyroid hormones regulate metabolic rate, but it doesn't fix insulin resistance. Cortisol coordinates stress and recovery, but when it's chronically elevated, it accelerates aging. Hormones modulate response, they don't create the stimulus. This is why hormones are often misused. If someone isn't sleeping, training, or eating appropriately, hormones may improve symptoms and lab values, but tissue quality doesn't improve. That's not because hormones don't work, it's because biology doesn't allow shortcuts. Peptides work in a similar way, but through precision signaling. Peptides are short chains of amino acids that tell the tissue what to do, how to heal, how to repair, how to grow, how to reduce inflammation. Some of the common peptides are like PBC 157, which supports tissue and gut healing, TB 500, which supports soft tissue repair and mobility, CJC 1295, and ipamorelin. They support growth hormone signaling and recovery. And then there are GPL1s, which influence appetite regulation, insulin sensitivity, and metabolic health. Each of these work by enhancing signaling pathways that already exist in the body, but peptides don't override physiology. They require a responsive system. So if inflammation is high, sleep is poor, nutrition is inadequate, and there's no mechanical stimulus, the signal is blunted. I often explain it this way. Peptides are like email sent to cells. If the inbox is overloaded or ignored, the message doesn't get acted on. Other advanced therapies, such as IV therapies, regenerative injections, metabolic interventions, work by removing the friction from the system. They can improve recovery speed, reduce oxidative stress, support mitochondrial function, and improve nutrient availability, but they do not replace movement, muscle, fitness, sleep, or stress regulation. Once again, biology doesn't allow shortcuts, only leverage. What people may misunderstand is that starting at the top of the equation instead of the bottom is not beneficial. Sometimes they chase peptides before building muscle, hormones before fixing sleep, IVs before addressing insulin resistance, devices before consistency. That often creates short term improvement in how people feel, but poor long term health span. And this is why it can feel like these tools are working until they stop working. Energy improves, mood improves, recovery feels better. But if the foundation isn't addressed, progress plateaus or even reverses. And that's not failure. That's just physiology protecting itself. In Medicine 3.0, we use advanced tools strategically, not impulsively. We ask, what system is limiting adaptation right now? Is the foundation strong enough to respond? What tools remove the biggest bottlenecks safely? The goal is not more interventions, the goal is better biology. So, peptides, hormones, and advanced therapies belong at the top of the healthspan equation, where they enhance repair, recovery, and adaptation, but only when metabolic health, muscle, fitness, sleep, and stress regulation are already in place. They are accelerators, not substitutes. Advanced tools don't create health span, they magnify it. And magnification only works when the foundation underneath is strong.
So, this is where your approach really stands apart. So, how do regenerative aesthetics really fit into the health span equation? Not just cosmetically, but biologically and psychologically.
So I'm glad you asked this question because regenerative aesthetics are often misunderstood. When people hear the word aesthetics, they think vanity or they think surface level changes. But that's not how we approach it. In the healthspan equation, regenerative aesthetics are about tissue biology, repair, and alignment between internal health and external appearance, not just how someone looks. Skin is not separate from the body. It is a living, metabolically active organ that ages through the same processes as muscle, bone, and brain. Skin has its own immune system. It has its own blood supply and microcirculation. It has its own stem cells. It has its own mitochondria. So, this means that skin reflects metabolic health, inflammation, hormonal balance, blood flow and oxygen delivery, and cellular energy production. So, when skin quality changes, it's often a visible signal of what's happening internally. As we age, real biologic changes occur in the skin. So, collagen production slows, elastin fibers weaken, cell turnover decreases, blood flow declines, and then inflammatory signals increases. These are not cosmetic problems. They're cellular aging processes. Regenerative aesthetic treatments work by stimulating the body's natural repair mechanisms. They don't hide aging, they encourage healthier tissue behavior. So, just like exercise applies control stress to muscles so it adapts, regenerative aesthetics apply control localized stress to skin so it remodels and strengthens. Energy based treatments like radiofrequency, ultrasound, and laser work by delivering precise energy into the tissue. Physiologically, they stimulate fibroblasts to produce new collagen and elastin, improve microcirculation and oxygen delivery. They increase mitochondrial activity in skin cells and remodel damaged tissue structure. That's biology, not camouflage. Injectable regenerative treatments or biostimulators work differently. They don't simply add volume, they stimulate the body to rebuild its own tissue over time. They activate fibroblasts, they increase collagen synthesis, they improve tissue thickness and elasticity, and strengthen long term structural support. This is slow, natural remodeling, not instant correction. Treatments like microneedling and regenerative injections work by creating controlled micro injury. And this may sound counterintuitive, but that's how healing is triggered. These treatments activate wound healing pathways, increase growth factor signaling, improve collagen organization, and restore healthier tissue turnover. So, neuromodulators, are often misunderstood, and we're talking about things like Botox. When used properly, they're not about freezing the face. They reduce chronic muscle overcontraction, which leads to wrinkles. They restore balance between muscle groups to help create symmetry, and symmetry is a hallmark of beauty. They also decrease stress-related facial tension and reduce local inflammatory signaling. So this supports healthier tissue behavior over time. And all of these treatments depend on the body's ability to respond. When someone has good metabolic health, adequate nutrition and protein intake, healthy circulation, and low chronic inflammation, their tissue regenerates more effectively and results last longer. That's why regenerative aesthetics work best inside a health span framework. There's also a real psychological and biological component. How someone perceives themselves affects stress levels, nervous system tone, and behavior. When people feel aligned with how they look, stress decreases, confidence improves, social engagement increases, and motivation for healthy behaviors rises. That's not superficial, that's neurobiology. We don't criticize people for wearing glasses. We don't criticize people for getting braces or for treating acne or scars or even whitening their teeth. But we often criticize people for wanting their skin to reflect how healthy they feel on the inside. That double standard does not make sense. What we aim for is congruence. So, regenerative aesthetics fit into the health span equation because they support tissue biology, activate real repair pathways, reflect internal health, and influence psychological and neuroendocrine systems that meaningfully affect how people age. They're not vanity, they are regenerative biology, psychology, and alignment. So, when internal health and external appearance tell the same story, the body experiences less stress, and that matters for longevity.
No, that makes so much sense, and I agree with completely with that double standard as well. It makes a lot of sense the way you frame that. And then in terms of a lot of most of the powerful inputs into health span are invisible, right? So for example, stress, mindset, purpose. But how do these factors really show up biologically and why can't or shouldn't they be ignored?
Yeah, this is one of the most important parts of the health span equation because stress, mindset, and purpose are not abstract ideas. They are direct biological inputs. They shape how your nervous system fires, how hormones are released, how your immune system behaves, and how efficiently your mitochondria produce energy. In other words, they shape how fast you age biologically. When we talk about stress in medicine, we're not talking about being busy. Stress is how the brain perceives threats. The threat can be physical, it could be emotional, it could be psychological, it could be financial or social. And the key point to this is that your body does not distinguish between a physical stress and a psychological one. The same biological systems activate. When the brain perceives threat, it activates the HPA axis or the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And you don't need to remember that name. What matters is what it does. The brain signals the adrenal glands to release stress hormones, primarily cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones are designed for short term survival. They raise blood sugar, they increase heart rate and blood pressure, they redirect energy toward muscles in the brain, and temporarily shut down repair, digestion, and long term maintenance. That's useful if danger is brief. If it's harmful if it never shuts off. So when stress becomes chronic, the HPA axis stays activated longer than it should. Chronically elevated cortisol worsens insulin resistance. It accelerates muscle breakdown. It suppresses collagen and tissue repair. It disrupts sleep architecture and increases chronic inflammation. So at the same time, the nervous system stays biased toward fight or flight instead of rest and repair. This is how stress directly accelerates aging. Aging speeds up when damage accumulates faster than repair. So, chronic HPA axis activation pushes the body in exactly that direction. At the cellular level, it increases oxidative stress. It impairs mitochondrial efficiency and ATP production. It suppresses autophagy, remember that's the cell's cleanup system, and disrupts immune signaling. This is measurable physiology. Mindset matters because it determines how often the stress response turns on. Two people can experience the same event. One perceives threat, the other one perceives a challenge. Their HPA axis response and their biology is different. When someone feels a sense of control, adaptability, agency, or psychological safety, the nervous system shifts toward a calmer state, that state where repair happens. So, cortisol levels normalize, inflammation decreases, insulin sensitivity improves, mitochondrial repair increases. These are not motivational concepts, these are physiologic states. And then the last is purpose. So, purpose plays a unique role. Purpose doesn't eliminate stress. It changes how the HPA axis responds and how quickly it recovers. When stress has meaning, cortisol spikes are smaller and recovery is faster. So, there are large population studies that consistently show that people with a strong sense of purpose have lower inflammation, better nervous system balance, stronger immune function, and lower all cause mortality. Purpose isn't philosophical, it's biologic buffering. The body cannot ignore these inputs. Chronic worry, unresolved conflict, lack of meaning, or constant pressure activate the same survival pathways as physical danger. If these signals are constant, the body never fully repairs. That's why stress, mindset, and purpose amplify or sabotage every other part of the health span equation. You can eat well, you can exercise, you can optimize hormones or use advanced therapies. But if the HPA axis is chronically dysregulated, adaptation is limited. The body stays defensive, repair is postponed. This is why we see people with good labs, solid routines, and healthy habits still feel fatigued, inflamed, or stuck. That's not a lack of discipline, it's unresolved physiologic stress. This isn't about eliminating stress. We can't do that. That's unrealistic. What matters is stress processing and recovery. Ask yourself, does my body ever feel calm? Do I recover after stress? Do I experience moments of safety or ease? Do I feel meaning in what I'm doing? Those answers influence biology every day. Longevity isn't just about adding years to life, it's about creating a biological environment where the body feels safe enough to repair. When you regulate the HPA axis through mindset, stress processing, and purpose, you don't just change how you feel, you change how you age.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Young. I think that that's all such valuable information. I think those are good questions to ask yourself as well. And I think that this episode really gives language to something a lot of people feel, but can't particularly articulate. So, aging isn't random and health span isn't luck, right? So,
Right.
over the next episodes, we're going to continue to unpack each part of the health span equation: metabolic health, muscle, sleep, hormones, peptides, regenerative aesthetics, and mindset,
Right.
one layer at a time. So, if this episode changed how you think about aging, make sure you subscribe and stay with us. See you next time. Thank you again, Dr. Young,
Thank
and
you.
we'll talk soon. And have a great rest of your day.
All right, you too. Thanks.